Hello and welcome to this, another episode of Frame and Reference. I'm your host, Kenny McMillan, and you're listening to episode 117 with Judd Overton, DP of Totally Killer. Enjoy.
Yeah. Have you been watching anything cool recently with the break and all?
Well, I've actually just been, fortunate enough to be shooting in Europe over the break. I've got a documentary over there, so feature doc. So I spent, kind of the second half of the summer driving around over there for making a movie, which was a good little escape from the stasis of summer in the States at the moment.
Yeah. Are you able to talk about what the doc's about?
It's I probably can't say too much about it, but it's an environmental documentary.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so we took a bunch of school kids around in a big yellow school bus, and they were putting it to some CEOs. So it was a good, felt like a good project to be involved in, and some good visuals as well.
Sure. Yeah, that's always been kind of I guess I don't talk about it. I mean, I talk about snowboarding a lot, but I've been a snowboarder my whole life. And so like on the low end, like I'm always trying to help most environmental causes, because every day, there's this, what do you call it? Charity that I support called Protect Our Winters. This dude, Jeremy Jones, a professional snowboarder, started, and every email we get is like, and this season's probably going to be weirder,
Yeah.
Or
seeing that for sure.
Yeah. I was doing some quick research on you as much as I could. Mm-hmm. And I saw that you started in like news gathering and stuff.
Yeah, well, I started in Australia, and sort of worked in the industry for over 10 years there. And when you're in Australia, it's a small market, so you kind of do everything to get a leg up. So, I was lucky enough to kind of find my way into the Australian Cinematography Society, and they, kind of put me in touch with some people. And so one of the first opportunities, or one of the early opportunities I got was, camera assisting and sound recording and that sort of stuff with the news crews, and then doing some stuff in TV stations. One of my claim to fame was I used to put up the letterboard on Wheel of Fortune. That was a pretty fun nice. Early job while I was at high school. So yeah, that was a really good connection, and the ACS has been great. Ever since they really all bond together, and having those societies is so fantastic, because if you ever have a question about something, or you ever see something, you're like, how did they achieve that? You've got people you can get on the phone to, and I mean, it's less of a thing these days when you can YouTube everything, but I think it's always great to have, to kind of get to speak to often some of your, some of your heroes, and have a chat about how they achieved something, what they were thinking when they shot that.
Yeah. Well, I guess the PR people are here. Let them in. Yeah, I found with, I haven't spoken to a ton of Australian cinematographers, but certainly the American cinematographer guests have always been very helpful, even to me, someone who's not in the society, as it were. But all the Australian DPs I've spoken to all seem to have this I think it must come from what you're talking about, being a smaller market, but this very kind of workman-like attitude towards cinematography specifically, but filmmaking in general, where it does sound like all of you kind of just, the project is the project, and there's not a lot of pretense or anything about it, because there's only maybe 100 of you. So you're all working on the same shit or doing a lot of jobs.
Yeah, it's interesting because, there are quite a few of us, and I think there's, over 400 working, there's probably more now, but, cinematographers in Australia, and there's not that much made. So it's competitive, to be sure. But I just think it's, maybe it's just the Australian nature, or just the way we've come up, that everyone shares their knowledge and, is really supportive of each other. I just think that's kind of the deal. And, speaking to working in different genres, I mean, I was lucky enough to go to film school and, do a 2-year master's course there, which was all about cinematography. And I'd been a camera assistant. I'd worked, loading film and focus pulling on 16 and 35. So I'd seen a lot of professional productions before I even got to film school. It was a bit like, okay, rewind, go back in the trenches and start, learning from scratch. And this is how we, load a magazine, and this is how we behave on set. So you sort of get all the way through it. But I think that, coming out with that camaraderie and that sense of working with other people, and, the person who you're going up against for a commercial today might be the person who either you're asking them for an operating job, or they're asking you to operate for them, or, there's not that much work in that sense. So everyone needs to know each other. And I mean, a lot of the recommendations, a lot of the work I get is from other cinematographers who can't do a project or were attached and they've had a clash, and, would you like to take this over for me? And so it's a big world, and it's a small world even here in the States.
Yeah. I mean, I to the British cinematographers I've spoken to, there does seem to be a lot of like, well, we all started at the BBC and then moved on. Is it kind of the same with Australia, where it's like all local kind of like news or drama stuff, and then eventually there was like an influx of larger projects, or I don't quite know what the timeline is necessarily. The history of Australian film.
Absolutely, there definitely was that history of starting off at the ABC. It was over there, and even there were some sort of newsreel companies and stuff earlier, back in the day. And a lot of the cinematographers have come from that background. The John Seals and Dean Semlers have come through that sort of training, and the Steve Windens, and all those guys who've gone on to massive movie careers now. But I think it's still, now there's a lot of different ways, as with everything. There's film schools, and there's people who have bought a camera and then you just go out and start shooting things and get together with your friends. So there's so many ways to make movies and make a career for yourself now. There's not just the one pathway for anyone.
Yeah. Do you notice a kind of a noticeable difference between working on, a project in Australia versus a similarly, let's say, budgeted project here? Like, do crews kind of act the same? Is there a different, type of person that works on those jobs, I suppose?
No, I think actually that you've hit on the type of person. I think you find that same type of person everywhere around the world. These days there's really great crews around the world, and you'd be amazed how often, your focus puller type or your gaffer type or your grip type, you just kind of, you find those people, and I guess they find those careers.
Right.
They're the right person for the job or something. It's quite interesting. You often find similarities in the crews. And obviously I've been really lucky, but I feel like there's super talented people all around the world. Sometimes I get to take my crew with me these days when I'm, shooting across America, but often, you're hiring local crews, and there's great people.
Yeah. I guess it's kind of like, music, where a metal band or a pop band or whatever, they all kind of have similar types of folks that gravitate towards that music. So, gaffers are always like, here's your, or grips are like, here's your, your cargo shorts. You're going to need these.
Yeah. Shorts all year round.
Yeah. You had touched on it a second ago, but do you feel like, I personally would immediately gravitate towards asking, ACS members, ASC members, whatever, about whatever I was trying to do, but most people don't have that resource. Do you find that if you have been on like YouTube or whatever a lot, that there's good information out there? Because there's certainly bad information, amateurs teaching amateurs and bad habits and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, look, I think if you go down that rabbit hole, there's nothing you can't get a perspective on. Like everyone is out there trying to share their information or what they've just done, or it's like the new things they're playing with, the new gear they're playing with. So you can find out that there's nothing that beats experience, and there's nothing that beats actually getting your hands on a camera, or testing smoke levels and how to maintain that, and things that are just, there's so many variables in that you can't just watch a tutorial and say, oh yeah, I've got that. It's not like you've got a piece of software and it always performs in that way. You really need to kind of get out there and test it in different environments, and also, filmmaking is a collaboration. So how you manage or test or work when you're, a one-man band kind of running around with a camera on your shoulder and doing your own sound mixing versus when you've got a crew with you and people that are going to manage each and every part of it. So yeah, short answer is yes, there's a lot of information out there, but the wiser path, I think, is to only take what you want from it and do your own testing, work out how it works for you.
Yeah, that is the hard part too, especially if you're in a less served market, is like getting a hold of that. Like I live a 15-minute walk from my rental house. Like I have a really good friend, I'm good friends with them, and they're always open. I feel like any rental house is always open to let you just come in and mess around with the tools and try to get boned up on them.
I think so, as long as it's on the shelf. I mean, they're all looking and thinking this is going to be a rental for me, down the track. And the more people that know about the information, know about the gear, the less chance someone's going to just come in and take it out and destroy it.
Right?
If you could learn about it in the shop with someone there to help you, and especially at the moment, it's a really good time to do that because a lot of the gear is sitting on the shelves. So
yeah, well, yeah, not to mention like most rental houses, at least here in LA, are offering crazy, Alexa LF mini package for $1,000 a week, like ready to shoot.
Yeah. The problem is that the producers are going to want them to stick to that when we go back to work.
Yeah. What do you mean it's $5,000 now?
Yeah.
Do you find yourself excited? Obviously, everyone kind of enjoys gear a little bit, but do you find a personal enjoyment like nerding out about that kind of stuff? Or
look, I mean, I really when I was a focus puller, I really enjoyed doing all that stuff, and I kind of ran a rental house. I worked for a commercial production company in Adelaide in South Australia for a number of years, and that was the rental shop as well. And then when that company closed, I sort of kept on the rental company going while I was ACing. And yeah, loved the gear, all the things to play with, all the new stuff. And now, I mean, this is a time that it was 35mm and 16mm and a little bit of digital just coming in, but not really. And now there's so many new cameras and so much new gear, every day there's new stuff. And I need to keep abreast of it just so that I know what how to achieve shots and how to, maybe this will be good for this sequence you've got coming up, so I can keep those ideas, so I can use the technology for a creative purpose. But I think, one of the traps for cinematographers is to hide behind the gear and to sort of be playing with, with all the toys, and not keep your eyes open and noticing that the director really needs something, or there's something's going on in the set that you might be able to help out with. So I think, your first nature sometimes is, well, I know the toys and I can, really get into this. But at the end of the day, there's a record button or that's the the most important thing. Make sure you're rolling. But otherwise, I really work with my team and try to have the right people to handle all that stuff, so I can take that off my plate and just concentrate on helping the director, helping the showrunners, whoever achieve that vision.
Yeah, the other problem I've seen a handful of times too when I've AC'd or whatever, it's like you'll have a DP who really loves their package, especially if they own it, obviously. But and then if they're handed something else, it really trips them up. To your point about staying abreast of what's going on, but not being so precious about what you can, especially if like a budget won't allow for you to have something, and then you get all like, oh, I'll never be able to achieve my vision this way.
It's interesting. I listened to a few of your other podcasts, and I heard you're asking about what's the worst piece of advice you ever got?
Oh yeah.
And I think that's one of them. Is like you've got to invest in gear, and it's like when you're an AC, it's great to have some stuff, and it can help bump up your maybe your day rate goes up a little bit because you can throw in something or other. But the further you get in your career, it's exactly that. It's like, well, we have to shoot this on red because I've got 7 reds sitting there with packages, and they've got to be working. Otherwise, and the number of people I've seen lose jobs because, well, we don't want to go that way. You have to be flexible, and kind of go. You've got to be true to what the project is and what it needs. And there's a lot of ways to skin a cat. So
yeah, that is funny because like you always hear people ask like, what camera system should I buy, because they want to be a DP. But the only people who really buy their gear are like sound people and ACs. Everyone else is renting or doesn't really have gear. Or I guess, gaffers or whatever tend to have a tool bag of some kind. But
yeah, I mean, I think so, a lot of the gaffers kind of pick up bits and pieces. But even, as soon as you're shooting on studio lots and things like that, then you've got to go with the the package. If you're shooting with NBC, you've got to use their gear first. So it can be an encumbrance to have those monthly payments, and especially times like now, it's, there's a lot of people who are like, you look at all the forums and people are offloading gear very quickly. I mean, I've been lucky that, I've probably got 10 monitors sitting in different storage units in different countries, different parts of the country, and a few tripods and things like that, but I haven't heavily invested. I have some Blackmagic cameras, which are very affordable, and are the kind of thing that if they sit on the truck and don't get used for a whole project, it doesn't cost me anything. If we get to a stage where we're, running out of light, we need to throw 2 more cameras on an action scene or something like that, I can just say, hey, just bring them out and throw them on, and it's, if production throws me some money, that's great. If they don't, it's no skin off my nose, but I'd rather get the day, make sure we get all the shots.
Yeah, actually, you're not the... sorry, I had 3 thoughts at once. If you've heard it, since you have heard this podcast, I tend to bounce off the fucking walls. But I saw an interview you did where I think it was for Killing It. It was funny. You were supposed to come on for Killing It at one point, and then I think I didn't have time, and now you're here for, I suppose, Totally Killer, which is funny.
Yeah,
but
great. I'm doing a run. Anything with killer in it, I'm your guy.
Yeah, that's that's every. Oh, I'm a comedy DP. Oh, I'm an action DP. It's like, and if your title has the word killer in it, I'm fucking there, bud.
Yeah.
But I saw that, I think it was on Killing It, that you had actually been using the Blackmagic cameras as sort of B&C cams to your Alexa package.
Yeah.
Was that like, were those your cameras or did the, because oh, okay. Because there's been a few. I remember I was talking to oh goodness, blanking on his name right now, but he shot The Boys, and he said that he would just bring in, is awesome, right? But he would bring his personal Fujifilm X-T3, and if they ever needed a camera somewhere that they couldn't quite get the Alexa in or the Venice, they would just chuck the X-T3 in there and cut it in, and somehow that worked well. Whereas I've heard a lot more people using the Blackmagic cameras in conjunction with the Alexa. I guess it's easy to grade.
I mean, look, I think the Blackmagic, I've been using it for many years, since the 5D days, and I sort of got frustrated with everyone, like what you shoot is what you get with the 5Ds. And the Blackmagic came out with this little box camera, and finally, it shoots RAW and you can grade it. And I was like, oh, this is amazing. So I've sort of had one of them in my bag ever since, and obviously they've developed and they've become quite a professional camera now. But I think they really set out to make them match. I mean, when you're shooting RAW, you've got a lot of versatility anyway, but I think they set out to make them match the ARRI look, or with not too much work. They fall in line with the ARRI pretty well. And I tend to shoot most of my projects. I tend to shoot with a basic LUT, like a K1S1, which is just a basic Rec 709, slightly flatter, and try to shoot RAW as often as I can when the projects allow it. But that gives you the most versatility for, if you have to throw some other cameras in, or you've got a drone, or you've got whatever, like your baseline is always that K1S1, and most cameras sort of fall into line in a Rec 709 space pretty easily. And then you can apply your, whatever your show LUT or your CDLs on top of that.
Yeah. Are you designing your own LUTs to a degree, or are you just relying on colors to help you out in that way?
I don't, it's only if it's on like a low budget show that I'll put a LUT together. Most of the time I try to work with a DIT, and we'll do some testing at the start of the show. This is kind of what our daylight look's going to be. This is what our night's going to be. So they have a CDL, but what I found from doing a few shows in different ways, if you get too many LUTs and it's going through too many people, you can sort of come unstuck. So I like to keep it really simple for the post house. And often, like, I'll work with my colorist. I've been working with Siggy Firstall at Company 3 for a number of years, and he'll be on board at the setup time. So we'll do our tests with the DIT, run through to him and make sure the pipeline works, and get his feedback. So he would usually put out some of his LUTs back to us, so we've always got that as a reference. But then, whoever's doing your dailies timing or whatever, could be it's one of the junior colorists at night or whatever. So I'll then send stills each day and the CDLs from each setup, which obviously sometimes change through the day. But I found that if I can just keep that baseline of the one LUT, the one show LUT, as long as you're not taking it, as long as you're not doing too extreme a look. Obviously, if you start doing, I mean, some of the stuff we did with Totally Killer, because we had like a 70s, sort of it's 1987 for our flashback sequence, which is actually most of the movie, and then we had a contemporary look, which was a lot more contrasty, and we used different lenses for that. So they both fell into precise LUTs, but within that, there's still a lot of variation. And each day, sometimes you're shooting, the 80s in the morning, and you're shooting the 2000s in the afternoon. So you have to be able to sort of have a communication pipeline in the pathway. Often, we finish 5 o'clock in the morning and send them straight through. And so by the time I wake up in the afternoon, the colorist has already done them. So I need to make sure that he's seeing what I'm seeing, and that the right stuff's being uploaded for all producers to see.
Yeah, that actually, I was going to get to this a little later, but since you brought it up, I'm trying not to like spoil anything. This podcast is going to come out after the movie comes out, but try to be nice about it. But the moment where the main character steps out of the photo booth, what lens was that? Was that the Orion 21mm?
No, we actually used it. We used it anamorphic for that, but it was the Kowa 32.
Okay.
So, which is actually kind of like an adapted Kowa. I think the original lens was a 40, and then they've got like a wide angle adapter on it, but it was just really funky. Look, we explored actually using anamorphics to sort of split up, so that all of the 80s stuff would be shot on anamorphic, and all of the temporary stuff would be shot on primes. But it just, because so much of the movie is set that way, it was just a little too funky. It just wasn't quite, we wanted it to be, we wanted the 80s to be really, inviting, I guess, to the audience. So having all that anamorphic wonkiness going on wasn't quite the right way to go for what's basically an ensemble comedy.
Yeah,
with a lot of bloody bits thrown in.
I was going to say, it's not, I wouldn't even necessarily call it like a horror comedy or slasher comedy or anything, but it is a very funny film. Like it's a lot of really good jokes in it.
Absolutely, yeah, and Nanuchka's strength has come from, she's got a great background in comedy, and that's where I worked with her before on a number of projects. Doing all the young rock stuff, and I worked with her on Fresh Off the Boat for a couple of episodes, and so she's fantastic, and obviously really comfortable in that comedy mode. But this was a real, a learning process for us both. I've done a few horrors. I worked with Blumhouse once, operated on the show, did some second unit for Insidious, one of the Insidious movies. But it was really fun to kind of, play in that genre. You get to do so much more. And not to say that my lighting, even though I do some network work, it's not a straight, flat comedy kind of look that I've been known for. But this was, we got to have a lot of fun with this.
Yeah, we're gonna touch on all those topics. You basically spoke out loud my entire note card. Well, it's just now I got to figure out in what order to address them. But that's great. Because the first thing I thought was, I didn't even, obviously that's the first like 80s shot you see with that Kowa, and I just remember the like 360 pan you do. I out loud was going, whoa, like it's really. And I had shot with the Orion 21, and it has that very similar like fishbowl look, and I was like, oh man, I bet it's out.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I think especially putting it on the LF Mini, you're really using the whole lens, so it's pretty great.
Yeah. So in what way, when would you switch between the anamorphic and the spherical lenses then?
In the end, we only used that anamorphic for a handful of shots. We used it inside the time machine, and we used it for that one shot. That might have been it.
So that was like a mid-shoot decision.
No, we tested everything, and we went into Kess. Actually, we ended up going with Sim up in Vancouver, but Kessler were really helpful. We did a lot of testing with those guys when we were looking at lenses, and we basically, went through that whole process. Do we want to go anamorphic for the 80s? And it was just too strong a look. So what we ended up opting for is the geckos, which are
oh sure, yeah.
So they're so they're a rehoused vintage lens. It's kind of like a K35 sort of 70s vintage glass, but they're very clean and they behave nicely. Nice fall off, and you get the occasional sort of rainbow flares and things like that. So they're vintage without being too, they don't put up too much of a patina between the audience and the and what's going on. So I showed those to Natch and she really liked them. So and then to contrast that, we went with the Sigmas and Sigma Primes, which again are very clean. They're kind of like a master prime look, but because we had to run 2 sets of primes for the whole shoot, they're a little more affordable.
Yeah, those Sigmas are. I was talking to my friend Matthew Duclos about it. Well, maybe I don't know if I should quote him directly, but he suggested. I will say, full disclosure, his wife works for Sigma, okay. So he might be slightly biased, and so I just don't want to get him in trouble. But he and I both seem to agree that the Sigmas are an excellent alternative to the Master Primes, as you're saying. They are very. People like to say clinical. I don't necessarily think they're clinical, but they are very clean. They're very neutral. Yeah. Very sharp. They look great on any camera. I love those things.
Totally. Yeah. And they don't have, the look of the Cooks always put, are another amazing, really well-designed, well-made look. And the Leicas as well are just incredible. But the
Leicas are really good.
Each lens has its own, characteristics that it's bringing forward. And you've just got to choose the right thing for the right tool for the right job.
Yeah. That's the other thing Matthew says is there's no bad lenses. There's only the right lens for the right job. So were you using any filtration on the film? Because I noticed like during the party scene, the little twinkle lights are getting a little bit of bloom. Was that just because of the rehoused glass, or
that was the vintage laser? We did have some. I think we were using glimmer glass for a couple of times.
Love glimmer glass.
Yeah, and usually I don't like a lot of diffusion. I used to be more into the black diffusion, so it doesn't bloom the highlights too much. I'd rather do it with a lens than not. But often, those scenes where we're shooting ensembles and we're shooting with smoke, and I just use a little bit of diffusion just to kind of balance up the wider lenses or have a little bit more diffusion on them, so I can still shoot with long lenses without it all going mushy.
Yeah, it's funny. I was just the past 2 days I was talking to the DPs who shot Foundation, the Apple show. It's great sci-fi show if you like sci-fi. But they said almost the exact same thing. When they did use filtration, it was glimmer glass. They don't really use diffusion much anymore because I guess sensors, especially the large format sensors, don't really need it. And we all prefer like the black diffusions that kind of bring it down, and nothing above like a quarter, all kind of in the 1/8 zone.
I mean, I think we probably, because I also used a couple of times, we had some Premista zooms on. So if I was trying to match those in with the vintage lenses, I'd throw in a bit like a half or maybe a 1 on a rare occasion. But if you're pushing through it on a long lens, but rare, very rare.
Yeah. How was your approach different? I guess technically for the modern scenes than anything, but between Killing It and Totally Killer. It's funny to say them back to back because Killing It ostensibly a dark comedy. I don't know how you'd want to call it, but lighting is going to be a little different. You've got a TV show versus a film. Budgets are probably different.
For sure. I mean, look, in terms of there wasn't that much difference in the approach. I mean, obviously very different projects. And I think a lot more daylight work, in Killing It, we're in swamps and outdoors a lot and a lot of practical locations. So not as much set building in Killing It, although, look, I don't feel like the sort of budget point was too far off. And again, the gear package was probably similar in that we had, a couple of sets of primes, 3 camera bodies. We didn't use 3 cameras all the time on the feature, or if we did, we'd often Jeff Zucker, our the camera operator would sort of step off and go and do some inserts or some montage stuff for us if we, had the third body out. We had an operator for that. Whereas on Killing It, 3 cameras rolled the whole time. If I could get more cameras in, I would. Like we would. You're shooting at such a pace that you shoot rain, hail, or shine.
Right.
But again, like I think I'm trying to remember the schedule on the feature was something like 25 days or something. Like it was not a.
Oh damn!
It was super fast, so it wasn't that far off of kind of what you would expect for a series versus a film. But shooting in Canada, obviously the money goes a little further, and we were shooting in. Vancouver has 9 months of the year rain, so we were shooting night sequences over summer with rain 90% of the time. So just the number of grips and we would shoot under, we'd have condors and graydolls with big tents on them and shoot everything. So we're starting, in daylight and sort of lighting with small LEDs and stuff like that under the tents. And then as soon as it went to shootable dark, we pulled everything back, fall back to our big condor lighting and doing our wides and doing any reverse shots that we need. And then basically the end of the night, we had about 4.5, 5 hours of shootable night. So to do a horror film in 4.5, 4.5 hours a night for 25 nights is, it was pretty tight. So, so we I think that was the real difference between, shooting the last show and shooting the feature.
Yeah. The movie looks great. I was wondering how, I like to ask this to people who, I don't know what the budget was, but I would assume mid budgeted. How do you, when you're not given whatever, $150 million to shoot your dream, what are ways that you're able to move quickly, stay efficient, and still maintain that sort of, I hate to use the word cinematic, but cinematic, look, that quality level that people expect, especially nowadays?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's all about planning. Like this, this definitely wasn't anywhere near that kind of budget, and I haven't shot something at that budget. But from everyone I've spoken to, every budget has its own issues. And I think, I don't know if you mentioned or I heard on another podcast, they're talking about Oppenheimer. They needed to cut their budget in half so they could shoot on film, and so they could build these sets, and they wanted to go to all these different locations, but they ended up having to shoot one location for multiple things. So everyone's got the same problems. The real thing is working on like getting the script to a place that's shootable, getting scheduled to a place that's shootable. So the hard work on that is obviously done in prep, and we did a lot of I think we had 5 weeks maybe. I think about 5 weeks of prep, and a lot of that time was just and there were rewrites happening that whole time. But we've got some great set pieces in the film, and we just wanted to hold on to those. So we were happy to make compromises on other days and on man days and on equipment. So we sort of squeezed everything as much as we could to make it work to hold on to be able to shoot. Like to have 2 days on the Gravitron, for example, and to be able to get a Scorpio head, and to be able to, I was like, well, we can shoot these overhead shots, or these shots here can be done on a ladder mount, like we don't need a crane for this. So, so we're just making compromises. This green screen we can do in the car park, and we'll just drive up we don't need to go to a stage. And, so you sort of, it's really a juggling act with not just myself, but it's the same for the art department. It's the same for all the departments, and we all need to kind of work on it together and be in the same page, because something that one department saves on can go to the other department to make, building a carnival,
right,
look much better if they can save some money here from there. And, so it's all a negotiation, and just having an understanding from the script and from the director what those really key moments are.
Well, and to your point about the art department, I mean, the production design on this film is excellent. There's even again, that house party doesn't look, it's been, especially on student films, not that you guys made the student film, but there's always like, oh, we live in a house, let's throw a house party. It's like 6 red cups, and they're like, that's about it.
Yeah, that's all you got. Yeah, and I guess that was we had extras, but we're still in the middle of COVID, so we were limited. You sort of asked for a certain number of extras, and that gets cut in half, and so you have to shoot this sequence out looking in this direction, and then go and change costume on everyone, and that all takes time. So I think it's all about negotiation. It's all about how do you get the best bang for your buck, and how do you get the to really look like a big picture when you're on a tight schedule.
Yeah. How are you approaching the lighting in a lot of these like sets where it's ostensibly like the school or that house or anywhere else, where there's kind of overhead lighting, traditional house lighting? Like, how are you augmenting that to make it look good without being too obvious that you're adding a lot of, or maybe you're not adding anything? I don't know.
Yeah, I always like to. I think working with the production design and the set to find a way that feels naturalistic, to have the light come from at least the light that's established that's going to stay there, to be practical. So we, for example, in the school, we chose a certain area that we were going to do all of our hallway work in, so that we could change out those tubes for something that was, the right color. But again, I think we were shooting, you start shooting daytime, and by the end of the scene, it's nighttime. So we did need some sort of condors and things out the window. It really depends on the budget. And, sometimes you can't get, if you're in the city or if you're in a neighborhood, you can't get, big lights up into areas. So you have to make it a bit more localized. But luckily for the party, we managed to get, we had some condors up, from a neighbor's yard or from the street. So, the benefit of that obviously is we can do quick turnarounds, so it's right. We're not shooting 360 at any one moment, but we can quickly, bounce to the front of the house or the back of the house, and we have some stuff in place for that. And then when I get closer, obviously I'm just bringing in LEDs or whatever's sort of appropriate to that world. But we've been using a lot of the Nix globes and things like that, still moving now into using little like the little Roscoe dash pods and things that can be run from a dimmer board, again, just so that you've got that speed of being able to make little changes, little trims quickly without having to go and do big gel operations. And when we were doing Killing It, it's a bit of a different story because it's so much exterior. So we did have people up on condors and 18Ks and Arimaxes and all that sort of stuff. But again, you just it's horse taking courses. So whatever needs to happen, as much as I can, I try to get first choose a location and see what it looks like and be a part of that discussion, to choose locations that I know are already going to work, that some of the work's already done for me. And I also tend to embrace, if there's a color scheme there or if there's something going on there and it's not too far from what feels right for the movie, I'll embrace that and I'll just, kind of enhance or match our lighting to those colors rather than, it's all got to be stripped out. We've got to change everything. That seems like, well, you're in the wrong place to start with.
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, I'll show you or do some show and tell. 1 second. Astera just sent, I assume you've used the Astera tubes.
Yeah, absolutely.
They just sent me these.
Oh, okay.
They make, it's the exact same LED thing, but they got these little
yeah, I have one of those. My gaffer's got I think they come in a little 4-pack as well. So
yeah.
You can attach them together so they become a bigger unit. But yeah, they're fantastic.
So I'm glad you said that because they sent me these and they're like, all right, I write for ProVideo Coalition, so I was going to do a review on these, and I was like, I would love it if I could ask other people what their experience was because I haven't really been able to shoot anything in a while.
Yeah, they've been great. Like, they've got the little built-in fire effect, and you can do, flashing. If you need to do a police car, or they've got a lot of stuff that you can dial in rainbow mode for you can put a party on.
Yeah, I like the app, just the wireless DMX app, and it's all that Lumen Radio or whatever. But
yeah,
because the only other one. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, then the only problem when you start using multiple different LEDs is obviously no two colors are the same. So
right.
Finding out the right way to match those and having enough time with your dimmer board to sort of say, all of these Asteras are kind of have a similar color, but then as soon as you bring a light mat in, or as soon as you bring the Roscoe in, what does our sodium look like?
Right.
And trying to pick it. And sometimes you just need to get it to eye and and put it on the camera to really work out what the settings are there, because it's just too hard to, even with a light meter, color temperature meter, you can't really, it's hard to read that spectrum and get it exactly right.
Yeah. Well, and those Roscoe's I've only used once or twice, but speaking of color meters, like those things are shockingly accurate.
They're pretty great.
Like they're great. I don't see them getting used that much.
Yeah, I think they're coming out. I think they're, yeah. I mean, Astera's had a real corner in the market for a while, but a lot of stuff like the aperture stuff, there's a lot of new stuff coming out. That's I mean, there's always new toys.
Yeah. Well, and like we were saying earlier about getting kind of bogged down with toy stuff, again, just because it was the last 2 days of interviews with the foundation people, Owen McMillan, me and him were talking pretty extensively about how getting too focused on gear will interrupt your flow state and make things worse. If you're too nitpicky about stuff or you don't trust your instincts, you'll eventually, where I think it's easy to think that, if I'm really focused on everything, I'll be efficient. It's actually the opposite, where if you kind of just let go and trust yourself, things tend to work out better. 20% of the work usually does 80% of the result, and you can kind of just, flip, hit the flow state and just get to work.
Well, I think it's also about delegating and having a good, a team and trust around you. And obviously that's why we work with people that we've worked with before and build those relationships, and you know what each other's strengths and weaknesses are. So you kind of, in a team can make that work, and you know what you can hand over, and you still need to obviously double check, but you can trust in your operators and you trust in your ACs, and then you actually find you getting, like once you give people a little bit of, especially creative freedom, what comes back is often much better than you thought. You're seeing things, you've now got 3 sets of eyes on the set instead of your 1 set of eyes. And, so people are finding things and seeing things that, that you can then take that to the director and say, oh, here's my great idea,
Yeah.
But I think, definitely empowering people on set is a great way to go.
Well, and it's also and I feel like, I certainly have felt this way. I'm sure potentially you have. I know plenty of people have, where you spend all your effort trying to learn a craft, and then for some reason everyone's knee-jerk reaction is to believe that no one else has put in this amount of work to know this much. So I can't trust the crew because they don't know as much as I know. It's like, no, they probably know, if not more. Like, there's always someone has a good idea, always.
For sure. I mean, interesting, going back to what you were saying about, coming from, no, I've lost it. It's gone.
Was it the Australia thing, the small?
Yeah. We were just saying about, I've just lost it.
Fully lost.
Sorry.
Yeah, no worries. I did, in the random break of thought, I noticed that you were, what was it, second unit or pickup unit for Ad Astra?
Yeah, I did some pickups for that.
What was that experience like? Because that's a fantastic film.
It's a fantastic film. I never got to meet Hoyter, unfortunately. I was working with Adam Chambers, who's his gaffer on the project. And we just had to do some pickups with Ruth Negger. So it was some of the stuff at Mars, and we just had to match in and do sort of build some, without building the whole sets. Of course, we had to just do a few sequences there. So it was pretty small, but it was some really nice stuff with Ruth, and and getting all of their lighting plans and sort of going over that stuff was really, really fun. We did one scene which was all in this white room, and Ruth talking to Brad Pitt, and we're trying to work out. I'm like, this is probably, it was quite a long process. I think there were quite a few pickups, and it was quite a long process in post on Ad Astra. So when I talked to Adam, I'm like, so what was did you have a chase, or do you know what we're sort of working out where the light sources are, but it's this constantly swirling chase going on. And I think, what did he say? It's like a heartbeat, or it's like an ECG, or it's like, so that's you sort of, the tempo of the chase is like, and that's kind of the instructions we had. So we just had to reverse engineer it from, I had all the cuts, and I had, I didn't have a lighting plan for that location, but I had what the set looked like. So we obviously had to make as little of the set as we could. But yeah, kind of reverse engineering. It was a good mental challenge. And then James was directing virtually for that. So he actually came away from that project saying, "Oh, I'm going to do all my project. This is so great. I can just sit there and you sort of FaceTime me and show me what you're getting, and I can make little changes or like little directions from the comfort of his office." So I think he was pretty happy with working in that way.
Right. Was there anything you remember picking up from that shoot, if at all, that you kind of carried with you into your following gigs?
I mean, I think I've always, liked using it, like ever since the dimmer boards and the LED lighting has sort of become a reliable thing. I've really liked that. But I think the way that Hoyte has used light, like constantly moving and changing, and like keeping the lighting alive is a really great thing. Unfortunately, it's not something I've had the chance to do, because the stuff that I'm shooting, it's less about the mood in that sense. And really the stuff I've been doing, both on the horror film as well as on the shows, is about creating a space for the actors and kind of having as little effect, everything cinematography as kind of in the background as possible. Like, it's still, they need to have their own look and match and be stylish, and stand out from other stuff that's around. But on set and in the moment, but no one wants to be dealing with, we've just got to I've just got to take time to do that. So while I admire that, and it was a lot of fun to play with, it's not something that, it's not the priority on the stuff that I've been doing of late.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's probably a little easier to do, not to bring up the Foundation dudes again, but they were saying that, like, because it's a sci-fi and because it's in space, moving light is kind of the same thing with Ad Astra. It's like if the light's static, everything feels incredibly still.
Yeah.
So you kind of do need to keep things moving a little bit just to give the space some life,
Exactly. Well, look, on the feature, basically the final set piece, and I'm thinking you talk about it because it's coming out after the movie's released, right. And hopefully everyone will be already talking about this scene. But we shot the whole end of the film takes place on a gravitron,
right.
So that is as close to outer space as I've shot. And obviously we had to shoot on a real gravitron. We couldn't build it, and they're very specific about what you can do because it's a working piece of machinery and it has to get signed off by an engineer every time it's put together and put back, so they don't have any accidents. So they let us take out one small piece, and we could only put lights in to places that were already structural, that were already in the machine. We couldn't take anything out. So to create the sense of movement in that space was a real challenge, and was a lot of fun. We ended up getting some LED strips, but they had a casing on them that basically looks like an old neon. So it was like a rubber coated strip. So when we hung them out, it still felt like it was a period, practical light. And then with the dimmer board, we kind of created a chase that really felt, and we could build it up so that as the film progresses and as the gravitron speeds up, you see it in the lighting. And then we put on the floor, we put down some flooring, and we put like a slightly reflective plastic sheeting on it, so you're actually seeing the reflecting lights in all the surfaces. And to be honest, even when we were shooting on there, even though the gravitron wasn't moving, we were really, you feel it. You're in the space and you feel it. So the camera really sees it, and people would have to step out every once in a while because it starts to feel like you're actually spinning. So that was a lot of fun. And then we kind of brought in an Oculus head and just had it mounted on a dolly, but we could do these big sweeping 360 moves right around the inside of the gravitron, and make it feel like there was a lot going on. The stunt guys did a great. Simon Burnett was the stunt guy up in Vancouver, did some great rigs, and so we could get people walking on the walls and flying back towards, getting sucked back towards the walls and things. So that was a real fun play with light. And again, art department was very important. Camera, stunts, everyone sort of collaborating on that to really pull pretty awesome scene together. I've never seen anything like it. So I'll respond to that.
Yeah, 100%. And actually, it's a good thing you brought up the stunt team, because the stunts are excellent.
Yeah,
like they're very clean. Like they're not no expense was spared in the stunt department.
No, I mean, I think we really looked at it like, Nanuchka wanted it to be like a real John Hughes kind of 80s family ensemble, like the comedy stuff, and that, just to be really accessible to people, to kind of lure them into this, this innocent world. And conversely, she wanted the, all the gore and all the horror to be ramped up to 1 million, so
right.
So the stuff that we worked out, like the stunt, the set pieces and the stunts, we worked through those really early on. We sort of allocated those, and the first things we started working on. We broke them right down. We did storyboards, and then we put those storyboards together, hand them over to the stunt team, and they would do a previews. So we did it, as professionally as we could. And then they had limited time to put all the fights together. I think there's 4 or 5 fights and 3 or 4 kills, something like that. Like there's quite a few big sequences in the film. And we tried to hold on to those. We didn't want to drop any of those. We wanted to sort of show that we'd done our homework. They were shot very smoothly, but there wasn't any messing around. It was all by the number, and we had our boards up and we crossed them out when we had that shot, moving on. So it was it was handled. It was almost like a paint by numbers, because we'd done such great prep to get that all together, and with the stunt team, and obviously the actors when they stepped in. Keenan was fantastic with all of that action as well, very good physically, and then we were happy to kind of cut corners and shoot faster with those ensemble beats and with those comedy beats, because we've shot television of those kind of scenarios before, so it was okay to we knew that we could crunch those and still get great performances, but we had to hang on to the onto the scares and onto the action sequences.
Yeah, I mean, even that first initial fight with the mom, I remember about halfway through it, I think it's when she gets thrown through the table. I was like, and enough had happened where I was like, all right, Joanna Wick, this is pretty cool.
Yeah.
It's shot very nice. Actually, not to, this is later in the film, but I not to continuously bring up gear, but you did something that, another thing that I shouted out loud, and that is, do you know Todd Vaziri? He's a VFX guy. There's no reason necessarily to know. He's worked at ILM for decades, but he's pretty active on like Twitter and Blue Sky now and shit like that. But big split diopter fan. And there's that shot where the main character's walking up the stairs, and I was like, "Oh, split diopter!" And then they're rare, man. We used it. We used it on quite a few. It didn't get as many shots in the movie as we thought. There's an early shot where her dad drops her off at the car, and he's in focus and she's in focus. And we pitched it a few more times, but it didn't, but it just felt like one of those, really old school kind of filmmaking tools to use. So it was great. Yeah, it's sprinkled in there enough that it's a seasoning and it's not overpowering.
Exactly. Yeah, we definitely didn't want to draw attention to it, but it's just sometimes nice to do.
Well, I don't know, they're just fun.
Yeah.
What was the process like shooting stuff for VFX? Was that, obviously it was storyboarded, but was there a supervisor on set kind of helping you out, or were you kind of giving them what you got? Do you have a VFX brain to that degree? Like, how is that operation working?
Yeah, I mean, we had a VFX guy for on-set supervisor for most of the work. Again, I've done a lot of visual effects, especially in television, so you get pretty au fait with what you can do and what you can't do, and when there's going to be problems. So whenever there were problems, I sort of I bumped them back to the house to see if they had a preference for how we shot it or whatever. There wasn't a lot of green screen work, only a few handful of shots in there, but Ingenuity did the post on this, and they've done a lot of shows, both for myself and for Nanuchka before. So we had a good relationship with those guys. But yeah, you do get a little shorthand with what's going to be possible, and you kind of know what the rules are. And if you're going to break the rules, you give them a call and make sure, are they going to be okay with that? Or is there something we can do? Do we need some different plates, or what do we need? I mean, obviously, things like the splitting of the gravitron, we literally taped a GoPro onto the outside of the gravitron and took a spin at a few different speeds. And then, it was just about getting the right level, the right height. So, there was a bit of dialogue back and forth in post just to make sure that the angle that the camera was seeing matched. Obviously a GoPro is quite warpy. So you need to kind of say, well, you should only be seeing this part of the frame. It shouldn't be seeing too much, and it should be moving at this speed, and we put a bit more motion blur on if we needed, things like that.
Mm. Yeah, all the VFX looks good. I did have one question about, and maybe I'm making this up in my head, because again, it all looks good. I couldn't quite tell, but there's like a photograph. Was that replaced? There's like a tight shot of a photograph that I felt like it.
And she's looking through, and she sees that. Yeah, so there we did a green screen, I think, on that one, which is we hadn't shot that sequence when we. I think that was our first day that we were shooting in that sort of garage, and when we didn't have that plate yet, so they took we just put in a blue screen or a green screen for them to handle, and then they comped into that later.
Gotcha. Yeah, because the follow-up question was going to be, was it a script thing? Like, I was wondering if maybe you had shot something else and then was like, oh, that doesn't work anymore. Now you had to change or if it was going to be like a Back to the Future thing, which,
it was going to disappear. Yeah. Exactly. Well, that's not true. That wouldn't happen, as you know.
Yeah.
Maybe.
As she said.
That's what Back to the Future got wrong.
Yep. That's the river. Actually, to the other touchstones in the film, I had read in an interview that you only had like a handful of VHS tapes growing up. Were you the reason that they're watching RoboCop?
I think that was all Nanushka, but that was definitely in my wheelhouse. Terminator, first Terminator, RoboCop. I think my parents had The Killing Fields. All very inappropriate movies that you shouldn't be seeing as a child. But that's all we had. That's a handful of tapes. We had Grease, so that was mine for the kids, I guess, and a few others.
Dude,
E.T. at some point.
Sure. Yeah, when I was younger, we would just rent. We had a local rent, like locally owned rental house, Peter's Video. So we didn't really own anything, but when we did buy a DVD player in like the mid 2000s, it came with like 2 free DVDs. One of them was The Mask, and one of them was Get Shorty. And because I was
both quality, both great films.
Great films, but my parents wouldn't let me watch Get Shorty, so I watched The Mask probably 190 times, and like
that's probably the less. Yeah,
it's more. The Mask is almost more problematic than Get Shorty.
I think so. I was going to say that. Yeah, Get Shorty's pretty straight up the middle, but Mask has got some issues.
Yeah, it's a tough. Although that is where I discovered my love for Cameron Diaz.
Of course.
What else? There was something else I wanted to ask about this film, but now I'm blanking because now I started talking about the fucking Mask. Oh, it was so the opening of the film, you meet the parents, right? And I was like, man, I recognize that guy. Why do I recognize that guy? I was second unit pickup DP on the Detective Night series, which Lachlan was in.
Oh, fantastic!
So I never met him, but I was just like, why? It's because I saw the film.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think he's
a cool guy.
Yeah, and he. I mean, it's obviously Vancouver royalty, but I think was it Riverdale? Was he?
I believe so. I had just looked up the IMDb. Like, I think it was Riverdale.
Yeah. So no, they're really great into it. Was Julie Bowen was fantastic, and so up for what we put her through. She came on the set. She's like, right, let's go. Well, here we go. So
punch me in the face.
Yeah, she was great. I'm jumping on top, and it was awesome.
Yeah. I did briefly want to touch on Young Rock because I had not seen it.
Oh yeah.
And I was kind of wondering how you got, because that came before all this, right? Young Rock was like the first. Was that wasn't the thing that brought you to LA, was it?
No, I came over for. I've been coming back and forth. I've been shooting music videos in New York. I've been shooting documentaries, traveling all around the world. And every time I'd stop over in the States, and sort of, being based out of Sydney is a long way from anywhere. So, I sort of started to think about moving over here, and started setting things up, started getting my union days, all that sort of stuff. And then I was shooting a show. I went back to Australia to shoot a show. It's called No Activity. And we did, I think, 2 or 3 seasons maybe 2 seasons in a telly movie in Australia. And it got picked up by Sonny or Die, by Will Ferrell, Adam McKay over here. So they, and to play on Paramount Plus on for CBS. So we remade that and did 4 seasons of that over here. And that was really the first kind of big show. But it was just when streaming was really happening. They loved the look. It was definitely not a conventional look. The show is written to be super simple. It's all a series of two-handers. Two cops on stakeout trapped in a car, and what do they talk about? Two crims sitting in a building, what do they talk about? The women back at the dispatch office, and what do they talk about? And then we would sort of shoot all that stuff out. So we got these amazing actors, J.K. Simmons and Bob Odenkirk, some of the best sort of comedy people around. But we get them for 8 hours. We have to shoot them out for 8 episodes within that time. So just shooting super fast. And then at the end of it, there's a raid or there's some sort of big action sequence that each year we do, and that would take a couple of nights to sort of put that together. But we were shooting it really, kind of, I want to say like 15 days for 8 episodes or something like that. So it was a really fast shoot. And then, through that, you get to know some of the actors, some of the producers. Trent had worked on Brooklyn Nine-Nine with the guys from Killing It. I did some operating and, through some other friends, I did a telly movie. And then some of the guys on the telly movie, worked on Fresh Off the Boat. So then I went and worked on Fresh Off the Boat, and met Notch through that. And long story short, that's sort of how I ended up getting the call to do Young Rock. They ended up shooting the show in Australia, so I didn't end up shooting the actual show in the first season. But I shot all the basically the ins and outs and all the Dwayne Johnson stuff. So basically a big part of the first season I shot. Second season I wasn't available because I was doing Killing It, and then the third season I came back, set it up. They shot in Memphis, so the whole season was shot in Memphis last year for the final season. And I shot again all the Dwayne Johnson stuff. We shot that in a couple of weeks, and then the first 3 episodes I shot and then handed over to another DP so I could continue on. Did the second season of Killing It, which we brought back here to LA.
Yeah. Because the thing I was interested in is obviously the Rock is enormous, both physically and and I was wondering how much I don't think people, obviously it does kind of feel like the Rock plays himself in a lot of stuff, but he's especially in a movie about him or a show about him, but I don't think people give him enough credit for he's like a decent actor and creative mind, obviously coming from WWE. I was wondering how much control or how much creative input he was offering on that show, and kind of like what working with him would be like on a sort of behind the camera role.
I mean, a lot of that stuff happens before I'm brought on, but my understanding is that that all the stories, at least 1 or 2 of the plot points per episode are true stories, and then the rest of it is obviously a TV show. But he definitely, if there was something that he didn't like, it wouldn't go through. Like he's a producer on the show, and so there's nothing in there that he hasn't signed off on. But in terms of working with him, he comes in and he's ready to go. We again shot him out very quickly, which he's a busy man, so we sort of hit the ground running and did some long days and well, actually not long days, but we crammed
packed days,
some packed days, yeah, for sure. But I think again, in 10 days, we're shooting him out for 13 episodes, including a Christmas special, and each year the amount of the show that he's in has gotten bigger and bigger. So it started off and it really was just kind of like an intro and an outro, and obviously the amazing Randall Park, sort of linking it all together as well.
He's the best.
Yeah, he's so fantastic. And so having that set up, and we're doing our news broadcast and whatever we could do without Dwayne, but just bringing him in, and knowing that we've got him for a certain, let's say it's 8 hours, it's probably never more than 8 hours a day. He's got it really worked out and set up, and we get him in there and you shoot, and if you move him from one set to the next set, it's it's standing by right next door. So it's a lot of pre-production, a lot of working things out, but just to maximize your time with him.
Yeah, it sounds like on a lot of these shows, everyone is, but you're working very quickly. I feel like I asked this already, but I'll just ask again, just in case. Does your kind of background in documentary help shape what you do narratively? Like, especially working quickly like that, do you find that has an influence on you, or does it kind of work the other way, where the narrative kind of influences your documentary approach?
I think it's sort of a twofold question. I think especially these days, any cinematographer is gonna work fast. You don't sort of get to a certain level without being able to hustle. But I think what documentary has taught me is being aware and being alert in the moment. I think that's the thing. It's less about the gear or the structure, or being able to light faster, but it's more about just seeing things in the moment, that and being able to pivot. So you've done your preparation, so that you're going to get your day, and this is what we're setting out to achieve. But still having those sort of eyes in the back of your head, and being able to feel a vibe on set or on a documentary or anywhere, so that you can, if the story starts going in this way, or someone's tapping their foot, or someone's looking, like if there's something going on there, you can have a little quiet word to the director and say, oh, they just did this. Well, on that last take, they did this. How about we focus on that? Or, you sort of being alert and finding things. But then, I think absolutely the narrative work I've done absolutely affects my documentary. And, like I'm always pushing to make everything as great as I can, and you work with crews, you work with gear, you sort of find out what's around. And then, I think there's cross-pollination. I think all the, everything you do, you use somewhere in your work, in your career.
Yeah. Well, we're coming up on the hour, so I'll let you go. But like I said, man, I actually just watched the film right before we started talking. Like, I just woke up early and hit play, and I was like, okay, good. And then ran over here. Not that it surprised me for any reason, but it did. It surprised me at how much I enjoyed it, because I tend to just kind of, especially when I'm handed a screen, I'm like, all right. And then about halfway through that, I was like, I'm not taking notes. Like,
it's great.
Yeah, it sucked in. So it's a great film. I'm probably less excited for people to watch it than you are, but I am excited for people to check it out, because you did a great job on it.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, and we've got a couple of some festival screenings coming up as well. So I'm really excited for people to see it on a big screen. That's always kind of how you make it, even though it was made for Blumhouse and for Prime, to play primarily on Prime. It's great to see it on a big screen as well. I've had the chance to see it once on a big screen, and I'm really looking forward to seeing it with an audience and seeing how those jump scares work.
Yeah. Thanks for spending the time, brother. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, good to meet you, Kenny. All the best.
Frame and Reference is an Owlbot production. It's produced and edited by me, Kenny McMillan, and distributed by ProVideo Coalition. As this is an independently funded podcast, we rely on support from listeners like you. So if you'd like to help, you can go to buymeacoffee.com/frameandrefpod. We really appreciate your support, and as always, thanks for listening.